know you heard me on the radio, flexing. She loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K. I know you heard me on the radio, flexing. She loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K.
Rutgers Scarlet Knights fans, welcome to another episode of Night Watch with Larry K. Some of you may have seen that I've been doing the rounds. I've been on a bunch of people's shows. Big shout out to Aaron Brightman at the Scarlet Faithful. Big shout out to Mike and Richie with TKR. Awesome time being on with you guys. I will be back on with TKR soon. Aaron will be making an appearance actually on my show soon, so everybody stay tuned to the content we got going on. Rutgers needs as many content creators as we can because I know you guys can't get enough Rutgers talk just like me. Every time a game is over or something's going on, I rush to the different mediums to get Rutgers content. So I'm happy to be a part of that ecosystem. I hope you're happy to join me. I know I've been in and out of this space. You know, I got a lot going on during the day. I got different medical issues, other things going on. We all have to deal with it, but you know, it's not always easy. But the season's starting, and I'm here with you. So I'm happy to be here with you. I'm happy to give you some content. And today I wanted to do a little kind of broad-based, generalized season preview for the football team. A lot of you know I've been very excited about this year's team. I think there's a lot of potential here. I think the schedule gives us a ton of potential. And it's up to Rutgers. It's up to the team to chop the moment. It's up to every individual player who has to step up on any given play, on any given game day, to make it happen. And it's all there for Rutgers. It's all there in front of them. And let's hope we have a good season. I'll give you my prediction. I'll go game by game. I'll talk a little bit about what I expect to see in general, and we'll go from there. If you don't know, go back to my season prediction from last year. I predicted every game accurately. I predicted the 6-6 record, and then when I was on the College Huddle show, I was on with Zach, the Big Ten Talk show with Zach. I predicted a victory for Rutgers against Miami in the Pinstripe Bowl, right about that. So I was 100% accurate for last season. That's not to toot my own horn like I'm some genius. Okay, that was not that hard of a prediction to make, given the schedule and given how it was going to shake out, given the team. But I do think I was somebody, you know, who didn't get carried away with expectations way too high, who then was let down at the end of the year when we had a rough end of the season. And I also wasn't somebody who undersold that team, knowing what I knew about the team, where they were in their development. So, you know, go back and check that out if you want. I kind of have a decent knack for, you know, a general prediction on these things. That being said, I don't expect to be that accurate this season. I think this is a tough schedule to predict. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think this schedule is comprised of a lot more toss-ups. I think in general this season, what you're going to see is a lot of teams that are similar to Rutgers in the sense that they are in that middle type bracket in the new Big Ten, and they are on either an ascension or a plateau or a descension, but wherever they are, they're kind of in that strike zone. And if they're in our strike zone, then we're also in their strike zone. And I think that's the type of season we're going to see. In my opinion, you know, in a new college football environment where sometimes there are so many games in a given schedule that are not toss-ups, where, you know, you do know who's going to win, you do kind of know who's going to lose, and you don't have those competitive, just game in, game out grinds where anything could happen, which is what makes sports exciting. I think it's kind of refreshing to have a schedule jam-packed with toss-ups. And I think this is the first year in a long time that Rutgers is going to have that opportunity on more occasions than not to get there. So let's talk. Let's talk about it. You know, why am I hyped about this team? Well, Coach Schiano has said now for a number of years that we are a developmental program. I will say it to anybody who will listen, that he doesn't mean that we develop players in general. We are always going to be kind of towards the lower rung of the conference and developing guys who are then going to go off to brighter pastures, or that we are going to remain as a program in terms of wins and losses in perpetual limbo, in perpetual development, and never quite reach that pinnacle. That's not at all what he means. What he means is we are a program who, rather than cherry picking all the superstars in the transfer portal, rather than necessarily getting every single blue chip player who the scouts and the scouting services say has the most stars, we are going to go both at the high school level and in the transfer portal for players who mentally and culturally fit the philosophy of the program, fit the culture of the program, are willing to be coached, love football, want to be coached. We are going to develop those players. That's where developmental program comes in. We are going to mold those players with their raw skill sets and given their cultural, and social proclivities for the game. We are going to mold them into the type of players that fit into this culture, fit into this philosophy and plan for the overall program. And we are going to have a pipeline intact, which Schiano uses that terminology all the time. A pipeline where guys have come through a number of years in the program and are now set to take the lead, are now set to be the best players on the roster, and behind them are going to be various players at various stages of development. And as they're moving through the pipe, you're going to have guys at the back of the pipe who still have a ways to go, and guys right behind the opening who are ready to step up either next season, or if there's an injury, or just as role players or playmakers on a given day if their number is called. All that being said, I think this is really, truly, this is the first year where that pipeline is actually completely filled and ready to go. Does that mean that we necessarily have the most talented roster in the conference or the country? Not necessarily. But does that mean that the players in the program have now reached a point where this staff has scouted them out with their philosophies in mind and has developed these players from underclassmen to upperclassmen, seniors, juniors, who are ready to take the field as the finished product of what Rutgers and Coach Schiano and his staff, Harasimiak, Shiraka, the other guys, wanted them to be? Yes, this is the first season where that pipeline is completely intact from beginning to end, and where we are going to see that depth, we are going to see that experience, we are going to see those flashes of raw talent when they show up for the younger guys. We are going to see that discipline and that experience, have an impact on games with the upperclassmen. I thought last year was the first glimpse we were going to get of some of those guys reaching the end of that pipeline, some of those guys in the middle being able to be depth, but still not complete. And I think Schiano would say that we're never quite complete, and that's okay, because any work in progress is a perpetual work in progress, and anybody who strives for any goals is perpetually doing so. So I understand that, right? But this is the first season, I think, where you're going to see that pipeline complete and that vision and philosophy all the way back in 2019 when the new staff got here come to fruition with guys that they went out and got becoming fully upperclassmen now. And I find it interesting that Coach Schiano now, a guy who notoriously, I wouldn't say he's in the vein completely of a Bill Belichick who never gives you anything and never talks, but he's kind of evolved, I think, and he gives us more info, and there's more candor with him now than I've seen it maybe ever. And I think it's telling, right? Because I think you can kind of tell when he's more close to the vest, and not that he's outwardly, out with information now. He's still got some elements where he's close to the vest, but he's close to the vest, and he's kind of hesitant to be too bullish on what he thinks of the team in previous years. This year, I think we're seeing somebody who's confident in the implementation of their system, and he's outright saying guys are going to get drafted this year. Guys are going to make an impact this year. Guys are sitting in the scrimmages because we already know they have the reps. We already know what they can do this year. I'm confident in who my O-linemen are. I'm confident in who my quarterback is. I'm confident in who my backup quarterback is. I'm confident in who most of my starters are. I mean, this is the first time in a long time that we're seeing this type of mentality from Coach Schiano, and I think it's telling that what I'm saying about this pipeline being finally ready for game time is accurate. And then if you take that pipeline, that's all internal stuff, right? You can't control who you're playing. You can't control who makes the schedule. You can't control who's on your schedule. You can't control this, the different game kickoff times and bye weeks. And that's all internal stuff, right? We completed our pipeline. We got the right guys in the right places that we're comfortable with. Awesome, right? Awesome. But then the external factors this season, where you don't have the big three, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, on the schedule for the first time since we've joined the Big Ten. You have bye weeks, and Mike did something on TKR. If you watch my appearance on TKR, he broke down, the plus or minus rest weeks per game, and Rutgers has a pretty good one this year. We have bye weeks, before other teams. When they're struggling, they're kind of strung out after weeks in a row of playing games. We have some time off before we play them, etc. I think the West Coast to East Coast, all but maybe one game, can benefit us in some ways. And I think the kickoff times can benefit our crowd and what we can do and what we've seen we can do with our tailgate scene and whatnot to bring energy into the building. I think the external factors, along with the internal factors, are shaping up to be a good season. Now, am I sitting here telling you, get ready, to put bets on Rutgers going to the college football playoff, get ready for Rutgers to win the Big Ten, start taking those odds? No, I'm not saying that, right? I don't know which way it can go and how far it's going to go in the direction we want right now. What I do know is it's lining up and shaping up to be exactly the opportunity we'd like it for it to be. How far that goes and what the actual results are remains to be seen. And one of the things with me is I like to brainstorm a bit as I'm reading about the teams on our schedule and as I'm kind of formulating my prediction, but I don't like to make my predictions before I get on the mic. I like it to be candid. So I'm going to kind of riff on some of these predictions because it's going to be how I actually feel and what the vibe is based on the situations of the two teams close to the season, what I think is going to happen. So you're going to get an accurate, we're going to kind of go through the ebbs and flows of the season right now in the prediction phase, as we would in the regular season. So I don't have any general expectation. Let's see where I wind up with the record. But I think speaking in terms of the pipeline for this football team this year, look at the wide receiver room. I mean, this is one of the strongest wide receiver rooms we've seen in years. I don't think we've had a receiver room even close to this deep, at least as far as potential, since the 2014, 2012s type seasons and Flood's kind of good years or decent years here, which was a lot of Schiano leftovers in terms of the personnel. You have a player in Dymere Miller who was a star at the lower level, who's now getting an opportunity to shine. And a lot of times those types of players seize on that opportunity. And every report from camp and what we've heard and seen has been very bullish on him this year. And I could see him emerging as the number one receiver on this team. You have Brantley, who was supposed to be last year a primary contributor, and perhaps last year would have been a primary contributor, but we wouldn't even count on him to be back this year. But now, because the NCAA decided to let him play this year when they wouldn't last year, you have another infusion of somebody who might have been a top two wideout last year, all of a sudden is on this team that is probably deeper. And I think that's going to make an impact. You have Christian Dremel, who is returning from being our lead receiver last year, who is Mr. Reliable, Mr. Go to me in the clutch, Mr. I'll make a play if we need a play. He's coming back. You have Ian Strong, who showed serious flashes last year. A player like Long, who was showing flashes a couple seasons before he had setbacks, who, because of all the talent infusion, we don't even talk about as much, anymore. He's in the mix. You have Duff, all these, Black. You have these guys who are younger players, Teray, who we've seen make plays, who are electric players. that we haven't even necessarily, seen the full potential of. And this is that pipeline thing. Some of those guys aren't even at the end of the pipeline. They're still in the beginning of the pipeline, but they're still going to be able to sub in, make some plays, and step up if we need them. And that's just a very deep, deep room. And I think when you combine that receiver core with the running back room, we know Kyle Monangai is an absolute beast. We know what he could do. But Sam Brown, who in his own right has shown ridiculous flashes, especially 2 years ago, and towards the end of last year really came into his own. We know what we have in that guy who's behind Monangai. And then Benjamin. We've seen these guys with reps in games. We've seen them kind of put the team and the offense on their back when need be. A guy in Monangai who could have gone to the league, and even if he had gone to the league, we would have thought we had a pretty good room. Now coming back and leading the team. You combine that receiver core and with that running back room where this depth is evident and tested, right? This isn't all pie in the sky. This is guys we know what they can do, at least to some extent. Combine that with this quarterback situation in Ethan Kaliakmanis. Now, I was a fan of Gavin Wimsatt. I thought his skill set would continue to develop. I liked what he could do. But we never saw his arm come to fruition the way we wanted to, right? The first play of the spring game, you see him miss a screen. And the first play of the spring game for Kaliakmanis, you see him hit a bomb, penalty, but still. I don't think, and I'm not sitting here saying that Ethan is going to be some electrifying world beater. I hope he is. He's got all the potential in the world. There's nothing to take away from him. But I think simply a marginal improvement in the accuracy, a marginal improvement in the efficiency of throwing the ball with that running back room who's going to help to take the load off of the passing game, who's going to participate in the passing game coming out of the backfield, combined with that wide receiver core, I think is going to really shift this offense into another gear that we have not seen. Because we have so many playmakers. The playmakers are so deep. And the offensive play calling prowess of Kirk Ciarrocca, which hasn't truly been tapped fully yet, is now going to be accessible because if you can just get the ball into the hands of some of these playmakers, and they're all over the field, and the defense can't cover every single one of them, you have such a better, well-oiled machine than you have if you're not sure you can get the ball into one of their hands in more ways than, some simple passes or handoffs, and sometimes even the simple passes aren't reliable. If Kaliakmanis can simply make high-percentage passes reliable so that we know the ball is going to get into the hands of these guys, a lot more things can happen all over the field. And I do think Ethan can do that. And I think that's why part of the reason I'm so bullish on the potential of this team this season. The one thing that I think somewhat of a question mark is the offensive line, specifically the right side of the offensive line. You have guys locked in. You have Pierce. You have these guys, the returning starters. Schiano seems confident that he has 5 guys that he knows are going to go, and I think to me that shows a lot of confidence in the offensive line. They were better than expected last year. They held their own. I think they're going to hold their own this year again, especially when you're not going up against those certain big boy teams in the Big Ten. We are now a big boy team in the Big Ten. But are they as deep and necessarily as potentially dominant as our skill position players? They might not be. But that's where a coach like Kirk Ciarrocca comes in. And if there are games where the offensive line is not dominating the way you want them to, and I you know what, it's funny because I don't say this as throwing shade at anybody. I mean, there were games last year where the offensive line dominated, just dominated. I mean, Ohio State, I thought our offensive line was played damn well. I mean, I think they already did turn the corner in a lot of respects, but if we're looking at it comparatively to other position groups on the team, I think, we'll see if they're the stronger part of the offense or not. But I think that's one thing where, yes, if teams decide we're going to stack the box, we know your offensive line has been efficient, but how efficient will they be if we put our huge, big uglies on you and we double them up? How good are they going to be, and how good is that running back going to be? One, I think the running back's just got heart, one of the biggest hearts I've ever seen, and he's going to keep running. But if you now have a quarterback who can get the ball in the hands of playmakers on the perimeter, even if it's a quick pass, even if it's a quick slant, just to beat those, stacking of the boxes, you just have more ways to move the ball, more ways to win. And if you can get that element into this offense, add it to last year's team, and you got a lot more games that are toss-ups, you have a recipe for success. I think the defensive side of the ball, they were good last year. They've been good. Joe Harris-Simiak has done an excellent job with this group. This is the dark side defense now. They have this reputation around the league. They have this identity. They have this swag. They have this personality. I expect them to take a step up in terms of actual sack numbers and things. Last year we saw a good amount of pressures. We saw, good yardage stopping for a significant portion of the season. What we didn't see necessarily was the large numbers from the defensive line in terms of sacks. I think, as Aaron Brightman said in our conversation, Wesley Bailey, who can be absolutely electric, is going to kind of have a comeback year. I think he was playing hobbled all season last year. You get him healthy, you get him going. I think you're going to see some serious pressure off the edge. You have, these younger kids in the interior of the defensive line. I think you'll see some of them step up if we can get a rotation going there. I think it's also going to be huge. I think our safety group is extremely impressive, between Dixon and Loyal's now like a 3-year starter, kind of a ball hawk. I think Robert Longerbeam, quite frankly, love Max Melton. I think Max Melton, was an awesome player for this team. I'm glad he went to the league, and he's always, him and Bo are going to go down in Rutgers lore and Rutgers history for a lot of reasons, family reasons, cultural reasons, the impact on the field. Max was probably our best punt block player, and he was in on, some really pivotal plays last year on special teams. So it's a loss for certain, but I think last year, arguably, I think Robert Longerbeam was the best corner on the team. I mean, it was rare that you even saw a ball go his way because he was covering his guy so well. He's returning, and you have these other players that are filling the void for Max. And I think the secondary is going to be more than formidable. Linebacker, Moses Walker now working himself in. And, Tyrene Powell, like I said, I don't think he's going to be back early in the season, but arguably you don't need him that early in the season. So, I think as the season wears on, especially if he can come in later and be fresher and you get reps to the younger guys, I think the linebacking core is going to be beastly, and you have Teray there too. So you have a heck of a lot of depth. The pipe is essentially full. And I just think a lot of these position groups are going to be good. I know special teams is a big thing with Rutgers. I understand some key players on our punt block team are gone, i.e. Melton, but you're going to have guys step up and fill that void. That's part of the pipeline thing. Some of the younger guys who are hungry, who want to go out there and be part of the game, even though they're not getting a ton of reps on the starting offense or defense, they go out there for the special teams. I'm excited about it. I think Al-Shadi Shalom, who won us the game on a great run against Boston College as a running back, who's now switched to the secondary, he seemed to be in on a lot of those special teams plays too. These guys are just hungry. If they're not getting in as starters or primary rotational players on the offense or defense, they get into the special teams. I don't think the special teams is going to take a step back. I think it's going to take a step forward. That's part of that pipeline. That's part of that culture building, right? And I think Jay Patel has all the potential in the world. I loved what I saw from him last year. I was confident every time he got on the field. I think sometimes, some of his kicks when they were further out were a toss-up. And I think Schiano sometimes wasn't fully sure, if he should give him the go. But I'm of the mindset in college football, give the kid a go. Because he could nail a kick anytime. Maybe he misses one, but he'll nail it, a lot of times. And he's going to continue to build up those nerves of steel with his experience, with his practice, executing his craft. I was excited about Patel when he came in. I'm excited about him now. And I think special teams is going to be good. And in these type of games that we're going to be in, where it's evenly matched, close to evenly matched, you're going to need your kicker. And you're going to need your kicker to come through in clutch moments. And I believe that he can. So I'm excited about it. I think internally things line up. Now, what about externally? Let's talk about the specifics. Let's talk about the games, okay? Opening game wound up being a Thursday night game, 6 p.m. kickoff, Labor Day weekend, going into the weekend, the Friday, against Howard. So we think we're going to win that game. I think we'll win that game. We all expect to. Always fun to play Howard. You know, awesome tradition, awesome school. The band is awesome. It's going to be a fun time, I think. We're going to get reps. We're going to open the season on a night game where the tailgating should be great, where, you know, we have a bit of a showcase. And I think it's kind of harkens back to the old days before the Big Ten where we had more of these night games. And I think Rutgers does really well from a fan experience standpoint with night games. So I'm excited about that. I think that's a win, 1-0. Next game is a noon kickoff, again at home. The next week, September 7th, just old-fashioned college football, Akron. Akron, I think, is going to be coming off playing Ohio State the week before. So, you know, that's another game that we should win. And now we're 2-0, and beautifully, we now have a bye. So we get 2 games where we're expected to win. You still got to come. You still got to play. You still got to respect your opponent. But we're expected to win. You get guys reps. You try things out. Hopefully, cross your fingers, you come out of those games healthy. Guys are going to start to be nicked up, but hopefully there's nothing serious. You come out of those games. Now you have a bye week. Guys who are nicked up can get healthy. You can continue to work guys in. You can continue to work out things you want to work out. And you get ready for a big showdown at Virginia Tech. So that really works out well for us, I think. You know, 2 games that you're supposed to win, where you can get guys healthy, you can continue to practice things, you can continue to get sharper, and then you have a bye week right after that, where you have another week to sharpen your skills, to get guys healthy, to get things going. And then you have a big game against Virginia Tech. You're at Virginia Tech. Now, Virginia Tech has this game circled, I'm sure. They lost last year at Rutgers. They're an old Big East foe. They have a lot of pride, and their home environment is, by all accounts, a very potent one, a very good one. This game, based on Virginia Tech improving, I think this game can go either way, right? And in my prediction, I would not be at all surprised if I wound up being wrong. And I don't think if I'm wrong, it necessarily hurts the overall prospect of the season or dims my predictions in general for the year. I'm going to predict this as a win. And I know it's a tough game. We don't know the time, the kickoff time yet. It's down in Blacksburg. It's down in Virginia. And the team's going to be looking to avenge the loss last year and their formidable adversary. But just like I said to Zach on the Big Ten Talk podcast, we are a Big Ten team now. This is an ACC team now. This doesn't mean that we're always going to beat every ACC team, but it means that we should be able to line up in the trenches, to put our helmet on their helmet, and win the game. Now, do I think this is going to be the type of game where we win relatively, with ease, like, against Northwestern last year early in the season, and it just felt like we had control of the game the whole time? No. I think this is going to be a tough game. This game is going to come down to a few plays that are made on either side of the ball. I think the crowd's going to be revved up for Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech is going to be ready to play and hyped up. This could set off either team's season in a really good direction. Or it could be, leave one team licking its wounds a little bit and looking forward to where they can make up ground. So I think it's going to be a tough game, and anything can happen, right? Shiano always says, and I believe, games take on, storylines of their own, and you never know what's going to shift momentum or what's going to change the course of a game, what the turning point of the game is going to be. And I think it's going to be one of those games. I think we squeak out a win. I think it comes down to some plays by our defense, or even our special teams, and I think we come out of there with a win. I think we wind up 3-0 at that point, and we could just as easily be 2-1, but that's still okay. I think we come out of there 3-0, and I think once we come out of there 3-0, you got to remember too, we're coming off the bye week, and that's another thing I'm putting into this staff and this head coach. They like to game plan. They like to have something up their sleeves. And if you're going to have 2 weeks of very beatable teams, followed by a bye week, and they'll never say it, because and I believe they're focused 1 week at a time. They're focused on Howard. They're going to be focused on Akron. But all along, they know that VTech game is like the real start of the real, the real trenches, the real season here, I think they're going to have that game circled, and they're going to have something up their sleeve, and I think that's going to give us the edge a little bit too. I think it might just edge out Virginia Tech's edge with being home, but we'll see. So you come out of that game 3-0, and you're going to play Washington. You're going to play Washington at home. Last time we played Washington, it was a bloodbath. Okay, Washington is a power in this country. And look no further than what they did last year. I mean, they are a power in this country. But this is an 8 p.m. game at Rutgers. It's a night game. Assuming my prediction is right, and Rutgers is 3-0 going into this game, the hype is going to be real. The hype is going to be off the chain for Rutgers. You're already at the end of September, so you're getting into the fall, because we had that bye week. The hype is going to be through the roof. This is a West Coast, East Coast battle, the first of many in the future in terms of two conference foes in the Big Ten going at each other. There's going to be a lot of coverage on both sides of this thing, and I think the stadium is going to be absolutely rocking. And I think West Coast to East Coast travel, or East Coast to West Coast travel, can really affect teams. There's some jet lag. There's some, it's legitimately a little bit of a hike. Now, it's an 8 o'clock game, so it's not like they're playing out of their element. They're playing at like 5 o'clock their time. So it's not like it throws them off too much in that regard. But I do think Rutgers is going to have an advantage in terms of being the home team for a bi-coastal contest. And Washington has seen an exodus of talent this year. That doesn't mean they don't have guys in their pipeline waiting in the wings, and they do. And they could just as easily have those guys step into these roles and just be absolutely dominant. But Penix, the quarterback's gone. A lot of other really, high-end caliber talent has left that program. And so, given that fact, are we judging them off of last year and us also off of last year, or us this year versus them? I think this is another game where, hey, we could walk in there licking our wounds 2-1 against Virginia Tech, and Washington could come out and be, the next iteration of a very powerful national contending Washington team and really just impose their will on us. Or we could come in there, whether 2-1 or 3-0, as I predict, with a chip on our shoulder, with a lot of confidence, in front of the home crowd against a team that is still finding its footing with a new iteration of itself, who had to travel all the way from the Northwest to New Jersey, and we can take that game. I know it's bold. I know it's crazy. I do. But I'm giving us the victory against Washington. I say we're 4-0. I know this is crazy. 4-0. And now it's when things get really interesting. Really interesting. Next thing we're doing is traveling to Nebraska. Now, here's my thing. That little 2-week stretch in there, that early October stretch, that Rutgers, Nebraska, and then Rutgers, Wisconsin at Rutgers, I think we're going to go 1-1. And I know, Larry, you're saying they're going to beat Washington, and you're sure they're going to beat Virginia Tech on the road, but you're saying they're going to split with these two teams that maybe arguably, are traditionally, at least in the last few years, closer to a level that Rutgers could maybe beat. I think going to Nebraska, I think what's going to happen, especially if we're 4-0, is I think this fan base is going to get really confident. And they're going to say, well, Nebraska isn't all that. But Nebraska is going to be an improved team. Their offense, their quarterback, these guys are going to be ready to play. They've had an infusion of talent. They've been developing. Got a good coach, a well-known coach with a well-known track record. They're at home. We've never beaten them. And I think this is one of those games where, sometimes it just comes down to these powers, these traditional powers, even if they're not as good as they once were. Rutgers, even though they're at the end of their pipeline, they're not going to win every game. And I think when you go on the road now after an emotional high against Washington, win or lose against Washington, it's going to be an emotional game, especially if the prediction's going as I think it is, and we're coming into that game with so much fanfare and energy. That's a home game. Now all of a sudden you're traveling out to the Midwest, to Lincoln. And you got a team that's talented. You got a team that's taking you seriously for the first time in a long time. They're taking you seriously. They're ready for you. Talking to Nebraska fans and my Big Ten college huddle circles, they have a good idea in their head that, hey, this could be a loss for Nebraska. This could be our first loss of the year. This could be a loss, Rutgers. So they're playing us tough. And we're going in there after the emotional high. I think that's a game we drop. And it's another toss-up game, and it's a game that, is going to come down to a few plays. I think we drop that game. But that could just as easily be reversed. That could just as easily be, we beat Nebraska, come home on an even more emotional high, and then lose to Wisconsin. But for now, I'm going to predict we win against Wisconsin because it's at home. Want to get back on track. We arguably could have beat Wisconsin on the road last year, but for some really inopportune turnovers and some other things. But, again, both these teams, I think Wisconsin, because of their strength in the trenches and their traditional strength in the trenches and their traditional ability in the way they've manhandled us physically so many times over the years, arguably I'm less confident against Wisconsin than Nebraska, even though I think either game can go either way. But if I'm sticking to my prediction that we go 1-1 in those two games, I have to say that I think, Wisconsin, because we're at home, because we want revenge from last year, because I think despite how strong they still may be in the trenches and that traditional advantage in the trenches, because I think our skill players are going to come to play and we're going to have more than one way to try to beat you than lining up helmet to helmet and trying to run down your throat, I think we can pull that off. And so at that point, I think I would put us now with another win, and that would put us at 5-1. Now, I just want to caution everybody here. Do not think I'm being overly bullish and I'm being crazy and hold me to this. We could just as easily be 4-2. We could even be 3-3 at this point in the season. And none of it would mean that the season is a lost cause. I would say that in my going through this and weighing in on my more optimistic spectrum, we'd be 5-1. Being a little more down to earth, but still being realistic, we could very well be 4-2 at this point. Whether that includes a loss to Washington, whether that includes a loss to VTech, whether that includes, losing those two in a row to Nebraska, Wisconsin, just because of the high and coming off it, 4-2 is very possible, and 4-2 still would be okay. I just think at the end of the day, there's a chance to be 5-1. And here's the thing. At some point, you just got to do it. You got to get over the hump, right? So we could be talking about this team's potential and the program's potential in perpetuity. But at some point, it's time to do it. It's time, when the opportunity's in front of you, to do it. And that's why I say 5-1 at that point, because there's no reason why we cannot. There's nothing in the stats or the makeups that says you absolutely can't. You have no chance. And I'm not saying 6-0 because I definitely don't think that's going to happen. I don't. But 5-1 is feasible, and at some point you got to go out and not just talk about we could have been 5-1. We can be 5-1 against this schedule. You got to just be 5-1, and I think this team has every ability to get there. Will they? I don't know. And if they don't, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It doesn't mean they failed. 4-2 is just as good coming out of that stretch, just as good in a lot of ways. But it's not quite where you know they really can achieve to really set the world on fire at 5-1. So my prediction, I'm leaning towards a little more of the optimistic side. We haven't seen the season unfold. We don't know what's going to happen with injuries. We don't know what's going to happen with other teams. We don't know what's going to happen with us. Right now, I'm going 5-1. And we're home again against UCLA. Another west to east trip. If this game winds up being a noon kickoff, or this game winds up even being a 3:30, which isn't as bad, but I just think, and UCLA was close. They have the same record as us, I think, last year. I think. Similar to us. Middling team. Win some, lose some, as the judge and my cousin Vinny says. You know, they're right there. I give the scale in a game like that to the home team, just because of the bi-coastal trip. And I think Rutgers, that's the other thing. It's not just the teams we play this year. It's the way the schedule shakes out. We have games where we have the home game against West Coast rivals. We have games where we have had rest, you know, as opposed to our rival, and there's a lot of elements in the schedule. This is one of the now, saying it's one of the most favorable schedules that we've seen in years doesn't mean it's an easy schedule objectively, you know, without context. It's still a tough schedule. It's still a damn tough schedule in one of the best conferences in the country, one of the top two, maybe the best. But it's the most favorable we've had. So it doesn't mean it's favorable, you know, without context, but it's the most relative to our prior schedule we've had. UCLA, good team kind of like us, if I'm talking about last year, but we're the home team. I give us the edge. We could be 6-1, could be 5-2. Think about that, though. Given all the years of our futility since we've been in this league, as opposed, you know, maybe 1 year in 2014. Think about that. But just like 2014, where we could have beaten Penn State in our inaugural season in the Big Ten, some might argue should have beaten Penn State, not for all the interceptions and the last-minute plays by Penn State. Eventually, got to just do it. Could have done it then. Got to do it this year. In those close games, you can't lose those games. You got to win them. They're going to be close. The energy is going to be crazy in the stadium, but it's going to be a nail-biter. Almost all these games, in my opinion, are going to be nail-biters. That's why the margin of error from my prediction being way off or my prediction being spot on is minuscule. Because any game can go any way from, you know, as of right now. And games can unravel, so you could have some real bad couple plays early on for one team or the other and could turn into a blowout. Or it could be a nail-biter down to the wire. But as of right now, they're all nail-biters pretty much. So, you know, the line between 6-1, you know, and 3-4 is not that, you know, wide. So this is going to be an interesting season. But I'm predicting, you know, my optimism is weighing. I am so hyped. This is fan Larry, but this is also somewhat objective Larry, 6-1. Then we go over to USC. 11 at night, our time, late, jet lag, and don't forget USC is a good team. Preseason ranked number 23 in the country, expected to be good, traditionally good. One of the teams that I think people are saying is going to wind up at the top of the Big Ten potentially. We're now the ones traveling from east to west, and they are the benefactors of the bi-coastal showdown. I think we'll have a winning record at this time, but no matter whether that's, you know, a 6-1 record, you know, or less, I just think we're going to be hard fought, good place, and that's going to be a heck of a mountain to climb. You know, and I just don't think realistically. I think, as Aaron said when I was on with him, that might be as close to a guaranteed. I don't want to say guaranteed because that's the defeatist attitude, and this team doesn't have that. I'm not going to disrespect this team by saying that. And I know Aaron didn't mean any disrespect. I'm just saying that's as close to a predicted loss that you can get is that USC game. I mean, this year, and that's not even bad when you look at previous schedules. But that's where I think I don't think we're going to win against USC. So I just don't. I think we wind up 6-2 after the USC game, and then we come home. I believe we've got a bye week now, and I think that's well deserved at that point. I think it's nice to kind of have the 2 ease-in games and the bye week, then go on. I wouldn't call it a gauntlet per se because we have some nice little home and away matchups in there. But kind of the gauntlet, the meat and potatoes of the schedule after those 2 ease-in games in the bye week, and then it's a great time after USC, who's going to, I think, probably give us, a run for our money and could hand us a loss. It could be our second loss of the season, could be third loss, hopefully not fourth loss. But like I said, there's a slim margin for error here, and there's a wide range that could happen, all within the range of possibility. But in my prediction right now, I think they're going to hand us our second loss, which is just an incredible season so far, if that goes that way. I think no one will get mad if that's where we are going into that second bye week. It's a great time to have a bye week. Now you're going into the last 4 games of the schedule. And a lot of things can happen, but you've positioned yourself, if this prediction goes well, you've positioned yourself to have an awesome run at the end of this year. And so after a bye week, Minnesota comes to town. I like this matchup for Rutgers. Minnesota was not particularly good last year. I think they shake off some things and they get a little better this year, but I think Fleck is potentially on the hot seat. He's coming home to face his old mentor, Ethan Kaliakmanis. I don't think there's any animosity there at all. Kirk Shiraka. But I think, you look at this, you got these guys that know each other. You got Harasimiak. You got Chirac. You got these guys that know each other. You got Kaliakmanis. Minnesota seems to be, in this iteration of its program, either in a plateaued, middling place or more on a downswing, whereas Rutgers is on the upswing. And if the schedule prior to this shakes out the way I think it did, I like Rutgers at home coming off a bye week against a Minnesota team that I don't think is the Minnesota team of a few years ago. And I think, Rutgers pulls that out. And I think in my prediction now, my sunny sky prediction, we wind up 7-2. And Rutgers goes to Maryland. And, in a vacuum, I would like our chances of beating Maryland. They lose their quarterback, who was somebody who absolutely put on a clinic every time he faced us for some reason. And I think with him gone and Rutgers with a chip on their shoulder playing at a high level this season, I think going down to Maryland and kind of getting revenge on them for the last several years is feasible. That being said, I've got us at 7-2 right now. And although I'm going game by game, I just think that's really bullish. And I think at some point we're gonna drop one of these games. And Maryland's at home. And I understand that things haven't been as rosy and as optimistic there as always, but they're always making noise somewhere. And it seems like some years Maryland, they could get the same blowout losses as us throughout the season, but they always have some game where they play the other, some power really well, and they have some blowout themselves, and they're playing at a high level. And they've had our number for a number of years. Now, I think there's a good chance that changes with the fact that Tagovailoa is leaving, but they still got these perimeter playmakers, and they still got this team that for some reason perplexes our defense, as good as they are. And even though they were a rival for a while when we first got into the Big Ten, and even before then, I just, if I'm going to give us a loss somewhere to keep this thing from going off the rails with optimism. So they're like, that guy Larry's nuts. That guy Larry is Rutgers Al. I gotta say, one of these we're gonna lose some, and I think we're gonna lose that game to Maryland. That's where I'm gonna say. Now, if we beat them, I will not be surprised. But I got to give a 7-3 there. I can't get too crazy, and I think Maryland has had our number. Until we change that, it is what it is. Come home for Illinois. I think we're better than Illinois. I think we're home. I know we're home. I think the season's been a success. I think Illinois might be hurting, either middling team or not having a great season by then. And I think we take care of business against Illinois. I think at that point, we are 8-3. And I think we go to Michigan State. And it's a newer team now, right? I mean, they've got some new players and they've got things, but if I'm going to give us a loss at Maryland because of the recent history, it's not like we dominated Michigan State last year. We needed that miracle punt block, and I shout out to my boy Dean. It was pouring rain. My girlfriend was cold. She'd sat through 3 quarters. I'd sat through 3 quarters. I'll willfully admit it because I'll own. That way you guys know I'm honest when I'm honest. I'll be honest right now. I was like, the beginning of that 4th quarter, I think it was 1 drive. We didn't convert. And I was like, that's it. I gotta get this girl out of the rain. I gotta get home. And I was giving Dean a ride back up north to Jersey City, and I said, let's go. And we get in the car, and we're kind of clowning on Shiano. Why would he make them re-kick? And then we get the punt block, and the rest is history. And we listen to it on the radio. We have a cool story just because it was raining, and we were listening on the radio in my caddy on the way up north. But we should have probably been at the game still. But hey, we sat through it for 3 quarters. That's the honest truth. I own it. It sucks, but I own it. But we still beat him. And Shiano's first year, we beat him. I know that was the COVID year. Doesn't mean much going forward, but if it's kind of like that Nebraska-Wisconsin split, this Maryland-Michigan State split, I could go 8-4 and say we lose those last 2 on the road, but I'm going to give us the benefit of the doubt, and say, I'm not going to go crazy and say we're going to sweep Maryland and them, but I'm not going to just drop the ball after I have us beating Washington and say, we're definitely losing to both of them. So I'm going to go with a final record of 9-3. I'm going to say we take care of business at Michigan State. We go into the postseason with a lot of fanfare. Absolutely ridiculously successful season. Rutgers has arrived, and I think we get a heck of a nice bowl game. Probably the best bowl game we've ever had. And I think the matchup will be great. The location will be great, and it'll be a very memorable season for us. Now, after the season, I think you're going to see a sufficient enough exodus of players, and the schedule will readjust a bit more, that we may, wind up coming back to earth a little bit. And I think as Rutgers fans, we should always be looking at the, pinnacle of possibilities. And I know that's what the team is doing. I know that's what the coach is doing. Yeah, maybe there's just a continued ascension where we're some dominant power. But I think also, just getting to a point where we have seasons like we could potentially have this year, and then that season is always feasible at the beginning of every year. But some years, we're closer down towards 500. I think if we can get that to be the norm, kind of the way we had it in the Big East towards the end, when it was still intact, I think that is a good place to be if you're a Rutgers football fan. So I say that to say, I really hope we have the type of season I'm predicting here, because it's a golden opportunity where external and internal factors are coming together to give us that chance. And with the exodus of really good talent and upperclassmen that we're going to see at the end of this year inevitably, and the fact that the schedule is going to change inevitably, not just in terms of opponents, but the way it shakes out with bye weeks and things, I really hope we go out and do what we can do potentially this year and take advantage of it, because it could be such a memorable year. And I think success begets success. You get yourself in a place where you have that type of success, and all of a sudden you can get certain recruits, certain transfers, and there's certain fanfare that really can catapult you. And so I hope we get to where I think we can get, which my prediction now is a 9-3 season. I know it's very bullish. We can just as easily we can just as easily be 7-5 and still have a successful year and still have a winning season in the regular season and still get a good bowl game, a damn good bowl game, and still have a successful year where we, were formidable against every opponent, had some really exciting moments. We could just as easily be 7-5. And we could just as easily, win another game and have like some kind of, ridiculously memorable year in the vein of 06. That doesn't mean that a 500 season's way out of the question. Doesn't mean that, something worse, because these games are such toss-ups, and when they're toss-ups in the vein that they are, it's hard to predict at the beginning of the season. You don't know who's going to have injuries. You don't know who's going to get on a hot streak and be better than you expected, or who's going to be worse than you expected. You don't know any of that preseason. So I don't expect to have the same success that I had last year in the predictions this year. There's way too many toss-ups. But toss-ups are what you want as a fan because it's more fun. And if you're Rutgers, it should be what you want is toss-ups where it's all there in front of you. You got to chop the moment, every play. You can win, but there's a chance you lose. You got to go out there and you got to make it happen. Fate is in your hands. With the way this team is composed, with the way the schedule shakes out, I really like our chances. Guys, if you like this show, please click subscribe on the YouTube channel. If you're on a podcast platform, please click subscribe. Join Night Watch. We are literally like 4 subscribers away from 500. If we hit 500 subscribers on YouTube, a lot of new things can happen for this channel, and it'll help me to bring you more content. So we really got to get to 500 subscribers. If you just click it, if you're sitting there, it takes 2 seconds. It's right here. Just click it. Click subscribe. I appreciate it a lot. Just click subscribe if you're in here. If you listen to this whole thing, there's no reason not to click subscribe. If you're already a subscriber, tell a friend to click subscribe. Tell a spouse. Tell somebody else. Get us to 500. It's really appreciated. Be on the lookout for me soon, doing more collaborations with these other content creators. We've had a blast so far. Rutgers Nation is strong, and we are all spreading the wealth around and giving you guys more content. That's what we all strive to do. So I appreciate you listening. You can check me out if you're listening on YouTube. I'm also on the podcast platforms. I'm going to do my best to get most of these shows up on all podcast platforms as an audio-only show. But I'll also have the YouTube videos, so whichever you prefer. If you like to sit down and watch it on video, or if you like to turn it on a podcast while you're driving to work, whatever floats your boat, go for it. I'm trying to give you and deliver this content as best I can. Love you guys. Let's go Knights. I'm excited for the season. Talk to you very soon. Larry K. out.